Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 341. And tonight, we return to the Chamber of Mizarble. Right before the beginning of the last stand, we're going to be looking at the calls to action and Gandalf's actions right before things start to get particularly feisty. So that's where we are. We're at rapid action, which means probably people are going to start alliterating. They might not say something like fling fuel on the fire, but who knows? We will see what happens when we get there. Anyhow, before we do that, two very important announcements coming up. The first announcement is that tomorrow, Wednesday, the 25th of June, we are going to begin our new Mythgard Academy class, and we're going to be talking about the Peoples of Middle-earth, Volume 12 of the History of Middle-earth, bringing to a close our long discussion of the history of Middle-earth, chapter by chapter, through the entire series that we began, golly, what was it, 2015? 2014? I think it was 2015. We started Book of Lost Tales, Volume 1. Anyway, it was like a decade ago, but we are finally coming to the end of the history of Middle-earth. Yeah, Bob, we don't do sentence by sentence through the history of Middle-earth, just chapter by chapter. Anyway, so Peoples of Middle-earth starting tomorrow night. It's going to be great fun. I can't wait. Tomorrow's going to be kind of organizational. We'll look at kind of the preview material, do like a bit of an overview, maybe start a little bit of chapter 1, and then we'll really get rolling. But the first session will be tomorrow night, normal time at 10 or a little bit thereafter, Eastern time. So that's just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that was where that's what's going to happen tomorrow night. Now, the second announcement is a sort of broader announcement that I really am excited to share with you folks. I just shared this. We just announced this at Mythmoot. This is hot off the press, and it's about a new, or rather a sort of a refocused program that Signum is launching. And I'm really, really excited about this. And the reason I'm so excited about this is that it is designed to meet the requests and desires of a bunch of students, both recently and over the years, who have wanted to do this kind of thing. What we are doing is a program that we call Signum Tutorials. And the idea of the Signum Tutorials program is that it is designed to give people assign people an academic mentor. If somebody has a learning project that they want to do, if somebody has a scholarly project that they're working on, so like maybe you are there's a course of study that you want to do, and a degree program isn't going to work for you. Doesn't always, right? Degree programs are very cool, but they're also kind of rigid, right? And so maybe you want something a little bit more flexible in order to pursue. Perhaps you have slightly idiosyncratic learning goals. That seems to me not unusual, right? And you would like a mentor to help you shape a course of study and even do some one-on-one tutorial with you to lead you along that path. Maybe there's a project that you're working on. Maybe you have an idea for something that could maybe be a publishable article or a book, but you don't really know where to go. You really need help. Of course, when we have students within our master's program writing their master's thesis, they get a thesis director, and they work one-on-one with that thesis director for like a year as they're developing their thesis project. But wouldn't it be great to be able to have something like that outside the scope of a regular degree program? What if you have presented a paper at a conference or one of our regional moots, and you would like to develop it? You're like, you've got really good feedback on it, and people said, hey, you should try to get this published. And you're like, well, that sounds cool, but like, how do I do that? What's the next step? What does this really need in order to be developed into something that, like a scholarly journal, for instance, is going to take seriously? Maybe you have already written, like, maybe, this is something for many of our students in our MA program who have finished their MA program, and they have their MA thesis, which they've poured a lot of work into, and they want to take that somewhere further, right? They want to continue their research, and they want to build that into a larger book project that they think that that could really contribute to the field. How do they do that, right? They'd like to continue the work, but like now they're done with their degree program, right? And they don't have a thesis director anymore. This, of course, also applies to creative projects as well. Maybe you've got a story that you've been working on. Maybe you've been even participating in our space creative writing workshops and things. And now your story is developed, but it would be really helpful. You would really love to have a mentor who could be working with you and guiding you through the whole process of completing your novel, to hold you accountable and give you feedback all the way. Wouldn't that be cool, right? So for all of these reasons, in order to, we get lots of requests from people like this who have needs like this. And it's part of my own broader point. And that is, all of higher education is continuing education. Continuing education, meaning continuing to educate yourself after high school. All of higher education is continuing education. It's just that most of higher education only does a little bit of it, right? They focus all of their energy and all of their resources on a few very narrow tracks, namely their degree programs. And it's not really possible for most people to get the kind of learning that they want most of the time for the rest of their lives. And this is what Signum is trying to correct. And I think the tutorials program is going to fill a really huge gap for people. So I think that this is just, there's so much potential here. If there is something, I also mentioned a ways back a little bit too, like thinking back further. I said if you have presented a moot paper, right, and you want to maybe develop that into something that you could publish, well, what if you've attended a bunch of moots and you have an idea for something that you think could make a pretty cool presentation? You have an idea, but you've never really done this before and you're feeling uneasy about this. Well, again, we can help you, right? You can sign up for Signum Tutorials. So this program is really, really flexible, and we are very, very excited about this. The process is really simple. Let me show you briefly how this works. You just go to BlackBerry. So the Signum Tutorials program is sort of adjacent to Space. Space is not going to change. Space is still going to continue to be the place where you can go for awesome classes that you take for fun. But now, in addition, you can go further. You can go to the Signum Tutorials program. You'll see there's this new section on BlackBerry right here above events called Signum Tutorials. You click on Signum Tutorials, and you can get a little bit more information here. This is the thing I would want to draw your attention to. If you're ready to get started or just want to start a conversation with us about, like, hey, I've got ideas, I don't know if this will work or whatever, you click on the student interest form, and it'll take a, hang on, okay, yeah, that'll work. Take you to the student interest form here. It's a really simple one-page form where you just, enter your email and tell us what language you speak, then just tell us what kind of thing you want and the level of intensity. Because you can do this at different levels, right? If you want to just have sort of a more, if you're kind of doing this on the side, if this is your hobby, right, or something like that, you don't have to spend like 20 hours a week on it, right? We have a sort of a low baseline level of engagement with your tutorial, with your tutor, that is, with your preceptor. But if you are, maybe you're coming up against a deadline, right? Or maybe it's just, at different times, it's month by month. Is how it's assessed, right? So anytime, maybe there will be a season, like perhaps, you're going to hand in a draft, or maybe you're going to come in and plunk down a 200-page manuscript and say, hey, could you read this for me and give me feedback? Well, that might take a little bit of time, right? So if you need more time from your preceptor, or you want to meet more often, you can increase the intensity. So you can increase the amount of time that you're spending. And the and tuition-wise, by the way, this whole thing works on space tokens, just like our space classes. Our space classes are 1 token per 1 month class. Here, you pay the 1 token for the basic level of tutorial meetings with your professors, and that's it's really simple. Just kind of back up from that a second. Imagine that, right? Imagine, wherever you walk onto campus, on a normal university campus, right? You go to your local college and you walk onto campus, and you walk into the front office and you say, "Hey, I've got this idea for like an article I might want to write or something. There's this thing I want to write, and I could really use some help. So if you wouldn't mind, could you make a bunch of appointments for me to meet with one of your senior faculty members, right, in your literature department, so that they can help me with my side project? We'll meet a couple times a month if that's all right. Here, I have $175 for you, right? Take this $175 and set me up with some biweekly meetings with one of your senior faculty members, right? I mean, like, that sounds insane, right? And if you walked onto any campus in the country and said that kind of thing, they would treat you like you were insane. But that's exactly what Signum tutorials are. We're gonna be able to pair folks. So, like, for instance, many of you know Amy Sturgis. Amy Sturgis is a internationally acclaimed podcaster and an experienced professor. Amy Sturgis is an amazing lecturer. We've had her for many of our classes. She's phenomenal. She is so looking forward to teaching our Signum tutorials. She has said, like, one of the things that she immediately thought of. She's like, she was saying about how she loves to help students who have like a paper, but that they'd want to figure out how to get it published, right? Or, to polish up a paper for conference presentation. It's one of the things that she really, really enjoys as a teacher, is helping students to, like, who have, like, some work that they've begun with, and helping them to know how to polish it up and distribute it professionally. So yeah, you come with an internationally acclaimed teacher, and she'll come right alongside you and help you with your paper. So, like, that's the kind of thing that we're offering through Signum tutorials. That's why this is so cool. Bjorning, the someday I'll tell you the story for why people in about 24 states in the country cannot study in our MA program. It's an entirely disreputable story. Not disreputable on our account, but it's a long, sordid, and disreputable story, which is mostly about trying to the higher education consortium of schools trying to prevent competition from new entries to the market. As I say, it's very disreputable and quite disgraceful, I think, actually, on the part of the state governments as well as on the part of higher education as a whole. But in any case, yes, that is why that happens, but there is, of course, no such restriction for this. Now, keep in mind, with Signum tutorials, there is no degree attached to this, right? So if it's like the actual degree, if it's like the letters after your name that matter to you, the Signum tutorials program is going to help. But if it is just learning, the achievement of a project, the polishing of an essay, the writing of a book, if it's something like that you want to do, then we can do that. And in addition, by the way, one of the things that's also really exciting about this is that we can also offer tutorials on a really, really simple level too. Maybe you just have a paper and you need some writing tutoring, right? Like, you're enrolled in another school and you want help or advice with a paper that you're writing. We can give you that too. Maybe you need subject tutoring. Maybe you're trying to learn Old English or Old Norse and you're struggling with it. Well, we could hook you up with somebody who can help you with that, right? So again, for 1 token, you can get a month's worth of tutoring in any of our subjects, right? So anyway, that is another thing that as Rob Goslin, our space director, who's he and his team are also organizing the Signum tutorials. As Rob likes to say, the Signum tutorials can cover everything from paragraphs to PhDs, the full range of stuff here. There you go. Yes, Nerdosapiens. I'm so glad that you are getting connected with this. Nerdosapiens and I had a chat about her project at Mountain Moot. And I was telling her, it was so funny, Nerdosapiens, because literally at that time, we were like still, as I think I mentioned to you, we were still like just about to release this. We had just been kind of working on this. And then you happened to mention to me at Mountain Moot, like, I want to work on this project. Is there any way I can do that? And I was like, it's funny that you should say so. Anyway, yes, that is all stuff that's coming up. So anyway, so this is new. And this is a really exciting opportunity. So I encourage you to. The student interest form is really low risk. When you fill out the student interest form, our team will get in touch with you, and we'll have some initial conversations to figure out what to do and everything. There's if it's like a larger project or a course of studies that you're wanting to kind of put together for yourself, there'll be like an orientation month, right, while we meet with you to figure that out. If you just need tutoring for something like subject tutoring or writing tutoring, that's real simple, and we can just get you hooked up with that right away. Anyway, this is Signum University's continued efforts to offer all of the kinds of instruction and assistance to students that the rest of higher education does not. Anyway, but with that, let us get back to the text here. So, where were we? We started the first paragraph last time, as I recall. But let's go on beyond my peek into the first paragraph and read the whole thing again. Another harsh horn call and shrill cries rang out. Feet were coming down the corridor. There was a ring and clatter as the company drew their swords. Glamdring shone with a pale light, and Sting glinted at the edges. Boromir set his shoulder against the western door. "Wait a moment. Do not close it yet," said Gandalf. He sprang forward to Boromir's side and drew himself up to his full height. "Who comes hither to disturb the rest of Balin, Lord of Moria?" he cried in a loud voice. There was a rush of hoarse laughter, like the fall of sliding stones into a pit. Amid the clamor, a deep voice was raised in command. Doom, boom, doom, went the drums in the deep. With a quick movement, Gandalf stepped before the narrow opening of the door and thrust forward his staff. There was a dazzling flash that lit the chamber and the passage outside. For an instant the wizard looked out. Arrows whined and whistled down the corridor as he sprang back. All right. So as I said, you may remember 2 weeks ago we started with that first paragraph. Remember that we were I was briefly alarmed that Sting was glinting and we didn't get another GL. Like, he almost broke the GL alliteration rule, that says if in the Lord of the Rings you're going to use a word that starts with the letters GL, you have to alliterate it. Like, that's not optional, I don't think. But of course, Glamdring, I was overlooking it, so there it is. Whew. So let's begin focusing on that second paragraph, on Gandalf's words. Okay, hang on. Can I just? I'm gonna do a brief sidebar for a second though. First, before we do that, I gave a really fun talk at Mythmoot this year. So last year at Mythmoot, I gave my talk doing my alliterative analysis of Gimli's poem, Gimli's song, which you'll remember we kind of completed that work when we went through and did the poem with the coloring the little sibilants and all that sort of thing. So this year, I followed that up with a shortened version, of the talk I gave at Osmoot in January called "The Music of Words," where I was looking at I was trying to explain and to demonstrate to people who don't really who haven't really like sat down and listened to it and thought about it, the poetics of hip hop and how rap music works, because my thesis that I was pushing and that I would still push is that Tolkien's poetry and rap music are the two places where you can hear the attention to the musicality of words in its purest form. And that the kind of patterns and the kind of attention that Tolkien pays to the sound of words is only paralleled in rap music. But that the two of them, that is Tolkien and rap music, I'm a huge Eminem fan, of course, as many people know. Anyway, that they're very, very similar in how they approach and how they deploy the sounds of words. So I was kind of looking at that and sort of showing how that works. And in the context of doing this, it was really fun because there was another talk the next day that Joe Hoffman gave. Some of you have met Joe. Joe comes to Mythmoot every year. If you've been to Mythmoot, you might have met Joe. Joe is just delightful. And he gave a talk doing a statistical analysis of, basically he's kind of taking up my challenge from last year's Mythmoot talk when I was talking about Gimli's poem. And he was trying to do he was doing some he wasn't trying. He was succeeding in doing some statistical analysis to look at alliterative patterns and density of alliteration in particular. And he found a particularly interesting fact. It was my favorite. There was he had a bunch of slides, right, and was showing a bunch of data. My single favorite data point that he showed. Well, multiple data points, as they were both, graphs. But what he did was he compared the alliterative usage, like the frequency of alliteration, in Gimli's Khazad-dûm poem, and compared it with the prose on either side of Gimli's Khazad-dûm poem. And what he found was that the alliteration within the poem is actually less dense, with density being measured. When I talk about alliterative density, what he was measuring was how many syllables in between alliterating sounds, right, on average. So how many times, so like if you say, Glamdring glittered, for instance, that data point is a 0, right? 0 syllables, or, zero words in between the two. I think it was words, not syllables. So there were 0 words. So if it's, if they alliterate back to back, harsh horn call, right? That would be a 0, right? A 0 point data point in Joe's graph. Whereas harsh call and shrill cries, that would be a 2 in his graph, right? Call and cries are 2 words apart. So that's how he was measuring like proximity of alliteration. Because once you get out to like 8 or 9, right, then it's sort of, or 10 or 15, it's less meaningful, right? Then you're like, yeah, there's 2 words that start with C, like in the paragraph, but that doesn't really necessarily make a pattern. So anyway, in measuring this, what he found, as I said, was that actually the density was less in the poem than outwards. And we were kind of discussing it afterwards. And I think what that really shows is that in the poem, as you may remember from what I was suggesting about the way that alliteration was deployed, the what seemed to me to be clear patterns in alliteration, not only repeated patterns like within that first stanza, but then repeated and inverted symmetrically in that last stanza, which is the thing that really I find really cool and really blows my mind. But those patterns were not just, fling fuel on the fire, right? That is multiple alliterations right all back to back. The whole point is how he was deploying them across lines, even across, either within like a quatrain of 4 lines in order to make these connections among the lines, or between as sort of a bridge between one quatrain and another, that kind of thing. The very thing that was interesting about them was not that he was just using alliteration of words side by side, but that he was making this sort of pattern of these alliterations coming together. And so therefore, the comparative infrequency of like immediate alliteration, but it was much denser in like the 3 to 6 word gap range than the prose alongside, seemed to me to support the conclusion that he was not just like, that Tolkien's ear loves alliteration and appreciates it, I think is easy to prove, right? I mean, the GL rule that we were just talking about, to me, is like enough evidence just to show that he just loves the sound of alliteration, and he will sometimes go out of his way for it, and he will at other times kind of indulge it. I think like fling fuel on the fire is it seems to me a fairly indulgent kind of thing, whereas he was being more deliberate in his construction of the alliterative patterns within the poem, and so that's what I think that data suggests. Anyway, it was really so. I just wanted, because knowing that we talk about alliteration a lot, I wanted to share that with you. I am still, and again, keep in mind, I'm not. I want to make it clear. I've said this many times, but I feel like I can always say it again, because I don't want people to get confused, because I find that people's minds go this direction frequently, and so I want to frequently address the question. When we talk about patterns of alliteration, especially in Tolkien's prose here, when we notice it, I mean, as it's clearly there, I don't want people to mistake this for an argument that I think that Tolkien is going through and necessarily deliberately embedding patterns, that he's sitting here like, okay, no, I got to revise this paragraph because there aren't enough D's in it, or something like that. Like, I'm not saying, it's certainly not some kind of code or something, right? I'm not saying this is some kind of, that sort of thing. Yeah, I agree, Jackie. It seems to be part of his flow. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to talk about it. As Little Room Johnny says, he seems to live and breathe alliteration. His translations of Arthurian poems, the first book of Lost Tales stuff, the foreword to the Fall of Arthur gives a lot of insight into his knack for alliteration. Yep, it's just how his brain worked. But that's not the same as to say, oh, it's meaningless, it doesn't mean anything. No, it does. It's just like, if you can analyze a jazz solo, right? Somebody who's improving, you can analyze what they do, and you can even show that, like, when this person is improving, there are certain patterns, repeated patterns that you can find, right? That you can see, and what you're doing is basically descriptive work, right? It's like you're describing how their brain works. So there might be particular runs of notes that you observe happening frequently. This is a kind of thing that this artist often does when he's improvising. There might be particular rhythmical patterns, right, that you might notice that he often will deploy. You might notice, lots of different things like that, right? Different keys that he'll modulate into or whatever. Does that mean that, like, that proves that the jazz musician in question had this pre-scripted, or all of it No, it just means, like, what you're doing is you are making observations. You're seeing how this person thinks, right? You're able to describe, you're able to notice some of the things that make his solos the cool thing, but he's just playing, right? He's just playing it. Does he mean it? Yeah, he meant to do all that stuff, right? Because it's awesome and it makes his stuff awesome, but it's not like he's, so trying not to, we need to be careful not to try to make it sound more, or sort of assume it's like more mechanical than it necessarily is. But that doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean it's not real. Right? It doesn't mean he's not doing it on purpose, like that. But that phrase, like, is he doing it on purpose? I think that phrase is really misleading and often can lead us into thinking about the text in ways that are not really helpful, right? Is he doing it on purpose? Of course he's doing it on purpose, right? Is he conscious of it? Maybe he's conscious of it. Sometimes maybe he is, sometimes to a greater or lesser degree, but it's just kind of how he does. What we're doing, and this is always happening when we go as slowly as we do, right? When we sit back and let ourselves just kind of revel in the sound of his words and sentences, as we so often do, as I love to do in every single class. When we do that, what the things we're going to be noticing, the things that we are pausing long enough to really pay attention to, are the again, like the techniques that, you know, our artist uses. One of what we're discovering as we really relish Tolkien's prose, what we're discovering is what it is that makes his prose awesome, right? We are formulating, in a sense, and to some extent, some answers to the question, what makes this story so compelling? Just like you remember when I was talking about Gimli's poem, my whole thing at the beginning was, this poem ought to be boring. Why isn't it boring? Can we figure out why it's not boring? Because like it seems like it should be boring, but it isn't, right? And that's sort of the same thing. Why is it? We all know, we've all experienced to different degrees, right? Being drawn in to Tolkien's story. This is like an external fact that we have perceived in ourselves and in others. We have seen how Tolkien's story hits us and others and profoundly impacts us in different ways. By looking closely and by paying attention to these patterns, what we're doing is beginning to understand, in some ways and to some extent, how he does that. What is it about this prose? What is it about his writing that hits us so hard? That is so beautiful and so compelling. And when we pay attention and, you know, have our ears sensitized to these things, we can begin to notice it. And so in doing that, that's totally cool. Like it is a fun and awesome thing to do, to be able to see, look at what Tolkien is doing. But how conscious was he of it? How much was it on purpose? It's, in the end, I think it's not even really a useful question, right? It's on purpose in the sense that, like, he quite deliberately wrote these sentences, right? And that's what really matters. Gildala, and I agree. He makes it seem so simple until you analyze what he's really doing. Yes, absolutely. Jackie says, someone told me they didn't think Tolkien was a great poet the other day, and I almost pushed those class episodes on them. Yeah, I know. Yeah. And JJ, even, I know you're teasing me. I didn't say Tolkien should be boring. I said that poem should be boring. But let me go with it, JJ. Many people do find Tolkien boring. So another way of looking at the what we're doing, right, is even trying to understand, like, what is it that people are missing, right? This is something I remember. I began to explore this way back when I was in grad school, and I would sometimes get to teach my favorite medieval author, Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, who is so good, such a marvelous poet. His use of language so good, his wit. I don't know anybody who writes with a better, more genial sense of humor than Chaucer. He's funny. He's constantly laughing at himself and inviting you to laugh at him. He's just a pure delight. And yet so many students are like, this is boring. And that was really hard for me at first. But the thing that I got some really good advice from one of my grad professors, who said, look, students are never wrong. Like, readers are never wrong about that kind of thing, right? Like, the problem is not that this person has, like, discovered that Chaucer is in fact boring. Like, you know that that's not right. But the Chaucer that they're reading is boring. Like, the Chaucer in their head, like, whatever it is they're getting off the page is boring them. So what you need to do is figure out, like, what are they getting? What are they missing, in fact, right? Why are they finding Chaucer boring? Like, that's hard to understand. If you're, so obviously there's stuff that you're missing. If you're finding it, Chaucer, I could see somebody getting offended by Chaucer. I could see somebody thinking Chaucer was a little racy, right? But I can't see somebody thinking it's actually boring, except when he's trying to be boring, and that's the joke, like in the Tale of Melody. But anyway, anyway, the point is, when somebody reads Tolkien, when somebody reads, when like those people that you've met, right, who read Tolkien, and say, Tolkien's, it's so dull, it's so boring. Well, again, what they're reading has bored them, right? Why? I wonder, can we understand that better? What is it that they're missing? And what is it that we're seeing that they're not? That we can't even understand how they could find this boring. Anyway, so these are some of the rewards that we get from our very close examination. But as I say, I feel like I want to check in every once in a while on I had a couple conversations about this at Mythmoot, which is why it's fresh in my mind. About the whole, like, is he doing it on purpose, or like, the question about Tolkien's intention, which is, it's not an unimportant question, but it's not like, but it's not a simple question. It's not a trivial question. But Balinor, they have stopped teaching Shakespeare in California public schools. My goodness, I knew from an educational standpoint the state of California was a benighted place, but that is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Wow, that is appalling. Your daughter, who's a senior next year, has never seen Shakespeare. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. Josh, they should teach Eminem instead. Well, then at least they'd be getting something, right? Yeah. Though I freely admit there are certain difficulties in teaching Eminem in public schools. But anyway, Jackie says, this is why I homeschool. Yeah, I hear you, Jackie. Hard not to endorse that conclusion when I hear that California is not teaching Shakespeare anymore. Anyway, okay. But let's get back to the text now. Thank you for indulging my little sidebar there. All right. Wait a minute. Do not close it yet. So remember, Boromir had set his shoulder against the western door and was about to slam it closed, right, to bar them in. Gandalf springs forward. Notice, by the way, there's a lot of the action is getting really quick here, right? Gandalf springs. He sprang forward to Boromir's side. By the way, I love the reference to he drew himself up to his full height. Gandalf's like 5'9", right? Like, Gandalf doesn't have much height. At his full height, he probably can't look over Boromir's shoulder. Boromir's like 6'4". So, like, Gandalf's full height is like up to here on Boromir, right? The hat does add some, and so do the eyebrows, of course. But anyway, Gandalf is spiritually tall. Bjorning, I agree. Yeah. It's interesting that he says this. By the way, I'm getting that that's in the Nature of Middle-earth. We got the exact heights because he gave them to what was it? Wasn't it Pauline Baines? He gave their heights to. But Bjorning, I agree. It's a very evocative word. He drew himself up to his full height. Irrespective of how tall that height actually is, there's this sense of Gandalf preparing himself, right? If anything, there have not been very many times. Remember, it's like Gandalf referring to seeing Gandalf the Grey uncloaked back in Bag End, way back in chapter 1. You know, that passage we mostly skip. We didn't skip that passage, but anyway, yeah, it isn't about the numbers, but this sense of Gandalf revealing something here, right? As if he's normally stooped down, but he doesn't have to stoop, and he can draw himself up fully and assert his authority, but he chooses not to carry himself as an authoritative figure most of the time. Anyway, that's sort of the, yeah, he is humble, Aspen, I agree. There's a kind of, there can be a kind of meekness in his demeanor, though his words are not usually meek. Gandalf's fairly sharp, right? In the words that he uses. But for Thoughtless, I don't think necessarily that his calling out here is trying some sort of magical effect, but he's about to use some kind of magical effect, right? And by the way, keep in mind that this is something we're going to be seeing through the whole rest of this chapter. It's going to be one of the things I'm most interested to discuss over the course of the rest of this chapter. The rest of this chapter will have more interesting Gandalf magic moments. We will see Tolkien dealing with, alluding to, explicit use of magic by Gandalf, is like wizard magic, in this passage, in this chapter, than we will ever see anywhere else in the Lord of the Rings. Like, we really see more of how Tolkien is, at least at this time in, writing this draft, thinking about how magic works in more explicit ways than we will see him do for most of the time in the Lord of the Rings. Yeah. So, oh, there you go. Thank you. Stephen quoted the passage from The Nature of Middle-earth, which gives the heights. Yeah, Aragorn 6'6", Boromir 6'4". Gandalf, even bent, must have been at least 5'6". Yeah, I think 5. It says he's 5'9", I think, when he pulls himself up. Anyway, yeah, he's short. Gandalf is not tall. But anyway, okay. So, anyway, so for Thomas, I don't think he is necessarily, doing magic yet in calling out, but he's definitely gonna. The dazzling flash of light is definitely magic in the last paragraph, right? So is there a correlation between him pulling himself to his full height, like he does with Bilbo in chapter 1? This sense of the gathering of his power, the gathering of his will, the explicit stepping into a both literal and figurative posture of command, that seems to be what's happening here. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so he sprang forward to Boromir's side and drew himself up to his full height. "Who comes hither to disturb the rest of Balin, Lord of Moria?" he cried in a loud voice. Now, that's a really interesting thing for him to shout, isn't it? On the one hand, he doesn't exactly want to give the names and resumes of everybody actually standing in the room. Nor is there any reason to think that if he did so, the orcs outside would all run away. Exactly, right? So he's kind of declaring himself. I mean, he's about to declare himself, and somebody's going to use magic. And remember that when he just lit a log on fire on Carothras, he said it wrote "Gandalf is here" in letters that could be read all the way down to the Vales of Anduin, right? So, and even though that's probably hyperbole, presumably his use of you got to think that his dazzling flash that lights the chamber is gonna say Gandalf is here in signs that can be read, for at least a few hundred yards, right? So there is a sense in which he's declaring himself, and Dizzy, I do agree with you about the drawing himself up to his full height, right? Like, again, no hunched down old man here. He is declaring himself. But what he actually says is about Balin. Who comes hither to disturb the rest of Balin, Lord of Moria? Yeah, and Trifle, great to see you this weekend, by the way. Wish I could have spent more time at Mythmoot. Do we have any evidence that the largeness of the effect and the visibleness of the magic are related? No. No, we don't know. Yeah. It just seems that certainly once he sees the orcs out here, he seems to be not... the time for stealth would appear to be past here. But yes, Cal Elros, I agree with you that it sounds like something a ghost would say to a tomb robber. Absolutely. Who comes hither to disturb the rest of Balin, Lord of Moria? It seems to me also that the sort of move that he makes, right? The effect, the immediate effect that he goes for is the eeriness. He is trying to evoke like the numinous fear attached to disturbing a tomb, especially the tomb of a figure that you have good reason to think is going to be hostile to you. The phrase disturbing the rest is pretty grave robbing-ish, right? As if he's warning, like, if you come in this way, Balin himself may rise to fight against you. Like, if you disturb his rest, right? Yeah, Johnny, are orcs particularly superstitious or afraid of the dead? Nancy was asking. We have no idea. We have no idea. I would gather from the fact that that's what Gandalf chooses to shout, that he thinks it's at least a possibility that they might get intimidated, that he could at least plant a seed, right? Ambrosius Aurelianus asks, I wonder if there's a curse associated with disturbing dwarven tombs, like for mummies. Could anything be more likely? Right? Dwarves are all about curses. They love that action, right? They love laying curses on things and setting, like the Thorin and company put a curse on the troll gold that they buried, right? So that if anybody else came and disturbed it, their curse would be laid upon them. Like, did it work? Yeah. Aranos was just thinking the same thing. Like, how efficacious was that curse? We don't know, but I don't know any reason to believe that they're deluding themselves. Why should we think that? They seem to think that curse would work. And we know that Thror laid a curse on his own treasure as well, which didn't, seem to work against the dragon, unless it did eventually. I say we know this because it's written on the urn in the Conversations with Smaug picture that Tolkien painted. If you read the urns, the runes on the urns, it says that Thror is cursing anybody who takes his treasure. Memes curse too. Yep, absolutely. So yeah, would a dead dwarf king, the Lord of Moria, lay a vengeful curse on any orc who dared to disturb his chamber? Quite possibly. Remember, one of the first things that we noticed was that the orcs had apparently not disturbed this chamber after the initial fight. not even apparently to loot it. So yeah, it seems possible that they had in fact kept the shaft of sunlight, as we discussed before at the time when we first entered the room or saw the description of it. I'm sure it helps also, right, to make it a room they'd rather not be in. But in any case, it seems quite possible that the orcs have at least a certain degree of wariness about this that Gandalf is trying to play on. I don't know if Gandalf did that math in his head, right? If he too was like, hey, they've left this chamber undisturbed, maybe they're freaked out about the tomb of Balin and think that there's a curse laid on it, in which case, let me try to use that, right? Because if they could even, if he can even just plant a seed of doubt in the minds of the orcs who are attacking, that would still be helpful, right? Even if just some of them hesitate a bit, that could help. Yeah. So that seems to me the effect that he's going for, right? There's also a certain audacity to it, right? When a horde of orcs is charging down the hallway at you and you just stand there and yell, "Who comes hither?" Like, who do you think you are to come down this hall, right? There's the sheer chutzpah of that seems, like a good move at this point. It kind of reminds me of Aragorn's parley with the Uruk-hai above the gate of the Hornburg, right before dawn, if you remember that. So, yeah. Anyway, I think that whether we see it as that, sort of a pure expression of chutzpah, or whether we see it as also an attempt to make them just a little bit concerned about coming into the room, I think that in either case, and it is, Mudmore, it's totally a bluff, right? I think Gandalf is tolerably confident that the wrathful spirit of Balin is not going to rise up and fight against the orcs, but they are going to find a dwarf in there, right? And so, again, you never know. You never know how that could pay off, right? It's worth a shot, Ambrosius, exactly. It's worth a shot. Now, of course, to respond to it is a rush of hoarse laughter, like the fall of sliding stones into a pit. So they laugh at him. By the way, remember the Uruk-hai laugh at Aragorn too, when he does this same thing at the Hornburg. But we're told that they laugh hoarsely at him. So it doesn't work. But Fourth Dauntless, I agree. The simile is phenomenal. Like the fall of sliding stones into a pit. I love that. Let me say what I love about that. First of all, the evocation, as Fourth Dauntless was saying, of the harsh and grinding nature of the orcs' laughter. Absolutely. But yes, very gravelly. I agree, Dizzy. But I love the business, the pit. Seemed totally unnecessary. If he had just said there was a rush of hoarse laughter like the fall of sliding stones, it would still evoke the sound, right? But the fall of sliding stones into a pit conveys the... on the one hand, it does give us a little bit more information on the sound, right? If you think about the fall of sliding stones on an open hillside versus the fall of sliding stones cascading down into a pit, the latter is going to be much more echoey, right, than the former. Exactly, Millen. the ending of the sound, and the echoing of the sound, which of course will fit within the corridor, right? I'm sure that corridor is echoey. The feet were coming down the corridor, right? But it's more than that too, because we cannot help, at least I cannot help, but kind of, it seems a little ominous, right? It seems a little ominous. Yes, the pit is the open grave, Mudmore. Absolutely. There is a sense of, Belangsmon, hopelessness. I like that a lot. Yes. Hopelessness of their laughter. It's stones that end up in a pit. Like, these orcs are going nowhere. It does imply some kind of doom, I think, for them, potentially. But it's also like a trap closing. Of course, if you are yourself in the pit in question, the perspective on that would be a lot different. Then look what happens next. So remember on the previous slide, we were looking at the drum beats. Boom, doom. And I was pointing out how most of the time they're introduced almost as if they're direct quotations, as if it's somebody talking, right? Look at what Tolkien does here. Remember in that first slide when the drums like interrupted Gandalf's comment? We shall see what doom. Remember? Look what happens here. Amid the clamor, a deep voice was raised in command. Doom, boom, doom. Is that the voice? It sounds like it's the voice, right? Now it's not, because we're told went the drums in the deep. Oh, it's the drums in the deep saying that. That's not, in fact, what the deep voice was saying, right? But for a moment, it sounds like it, right? And notice how, yes, the alliterative pattern brings all of that together. Amid the clamor, a deep voice was raised in command. Doom, boom, doom went the drums in the deep. Deep voice, drums in the deep. So we get deep on both sides, right? Doom, boom, doom went the drums in the deep. I agree. The rhythm of that line, Johnny, as you were saying, it's phenomenal, isn't it? Doom. But I mean, I'm tempted to read it in... Its rhythm is almost so perfect. I almost want to use the same kind of tone I would use in reading a children's book, right? Doom, boom, doom went the drums in the deep. I love me a good children's book that can maintain really excellent rhythm like that. Yes, it is anapestic. Doom, boom, doom is spondaic. Those are all stressed, of course. But went the drums in the deep is anapestic. And that's, of course, probably also why it put me in mind of a children's book right away, because Anapest is one of Dr. Seuss's favorite meters. The Grinch is in Anapest. The Sneetches are in Anapest. He loves Anapest. Anapestic tetrameter is one of Dr. Seuss's favorite meters. So yes, went the drums in the deep is perfectly two perfect anapestic feet at the end of that sentence. Good job, Johnny. That was exactly right. Yeah, Bjorning, I really like that. He says, it sounds to me like the harsh laughter is cut off by the deep voice raised in command. Like the enemies are soulless and without empathy, but they are controlled by a pitiless intelligence. Yes. Yes, to inspire. Tom Shippey in his talk at Mythmoot kept calling Dr. Seuss Dr. Zeus. Uh, and he's the first time he said that, everyone was kind of looking around, but then he said it like 3 more times, and we were like, okay, Dr. Zeus. All right. Anyway. Yeah, your grandpa says Dr. Zeus the exact same way, Luke. That's really cool. Maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know. German pronunciation? Yeah, probably. Probably. That wouldn't surprise me. Anyway. Your grandpa's from Cologne, which I just visited, by the way, in April. Got to spent a couple of days in Cologne, right after Mythmoot, right? And from Belgium, we went over and spent the weekend in Cologne after that. Wait, Geisel himself pronounced it that way? Are you for real? I did not know that. Dr. Seuss pronounced his name Zeus? Wow. Huh, I never knew that. See, look. Oh, surprise, surprise. Tom Shippey was right. I'm going to call him Dr. Zeus from now on. It's true that Seuss sounds much more kid-friendly than Zeus. Yeah. I'm going to call him Dr. Zeus from now on. That's it. I'm converted. Anyway. Yeah. Right. Bjorning says, I can't say Zeus because it makes Dr. Seuss into a caricature of a Hollywood Nazi. I mean, that is the risk, but I don't know. I think I can get past it. Anyway. Right. Okay. The deep voice. So let's keep track of this here. Whose voice is that, do we think? What do we have to go on? Very little so far. One thing, in fact, and that is the horns. Some kind of captain. Probably the captain who either blew or let blow, commanded to be blown, the great horn that just blew in the hall. Right? We know that they had a commander, that they were receiving marching orders, right? And now they hear a voice, a deep voice raised in command. So yeah, that's probably whatever captain was blowing the horn. We don't know anything else about them. Now again, either blowing the horn himself, might not be blowing it personally, might have a little horn blowing stooge who stands next to him and he whacks him in the head and he blows the horn when on command. I don't know. Given the parallelism with Boromir, however, I kind of imagine the orc captain blowing the horn himself, but who knows? Anyway, yeah. No, the interesting, Dizzy, was the voice deep from sound or from direction? Sound. I think that's the play here. He's a deep voice, like the sound of the voice is deep, right? But then you ain't heard deep until you get the doom, boom, doom coming again from the drums in the deep, right? So there's it was all kinds of deep with them. Kudos if you remember the through the looking glass quotation. I'm paraphrasing and saying that. But anyway, it's like both applications of the word deep there in that same sentence, right? And I think he's playing on the two of them. There's a deep voice and then there's a deep voice, right? The doom, boom, doom, the drum of the drums in the deep. And remember, the doom, boom, doom, the drums in the deep, this is the overall command. This is the overall signal, right? So doom, boom, doom seems to be the continued, like, urging on, right? Yeah. And he's still personalizing them. In fact, I would even say, Dizzy, the thing that I particularly like about that connection between the two kinds of deepness here is that it once more augments this idea, this still only indirectly given idea of the drums being like a voice. Yeah. That's the quote, JJ from Through the Looking Glass. It was all kinds of fastness with me. Anyway, yes. So, yeah, as I say, it characterizes the drums even more like a voice. And I think that that's really fun. Now, with a quick movement, Gandalf stepped before the narrow opening of the door and thrust forward his staff. There was a dazzling flash that lit the chamber and the passage outside. For an instant the wizard looked out. Arrows whined and whistled down the corridor as he sprang back. Okay, so Gandalf has been making a light on the end of his staff. He's been doing that for days, right, as he's been guiding them through Moria. Remember, it was like a will-o'-the-wisp in front of them? And the light that he's making seems to be being emitted by the end of his staff. The fact that the light, he thrusts his staff forward in the opening of the door. The light, the dazzling light that emerges from his staff, lights the chamber as well as the passage outside, which tells us that it's not a spotlight, right? It's not a flashlight. That is to say, it's not a directional cone of light. It seems to be a 360 emission of light, which seems to have been what his light was before, just a really dim one, so that it just looked like a will-o'-the-wisp bobbing along through the dark. This is the same thing, a glow of light in all directions, but huge. He's really amped it up, but it's still being emitted from the end of his staff. No, I don't have necessarily an observation to make, but just a data point to register that in all cases so far, Gandalf's making of light like this emission of light, is connected with his staff. His staff is the tool that he is using for this. And I suspect this might possibly be going beyond the warrant of this passage here, but I'm not sure. Tell me what you think. If Gandalf could simply exert his will and make an explosion of light happen way out in the hall, I would think he would do that. Notice that he's got to stick his staff out the door, make the light, which, by the way, draws not only attention, but draws actual fire, right? Well, arrow, it's not fire because on account of they're not firearms, but you know what I mean. Like it actually draws arrows to where the light came from, right? So it enables them to pinpoint where he is and immediately start having arrows whining and whistling down the corridor as he springs back. And he's got to jump back before he gets stuck by the arrows. He's putting himself in some danger here by having the point of origin of the light flash that he's making be right there near his hand, right? So presumably, if Gandalf could just wave his hand, exert his will, whether he waves his hand or not, if he just exerts his will and make an explosion of light centered like above the heads of the orcs or something, presumably he'd have done that. But he didn't do that. He instead, despite the fact that it puts him in more danger than doing that, He just makes the end of his staff glow, which is indeed, as I said, the only place we've ever seen him make light. What I am suggesting is that this seems to suggest the tentative conclusion that Gandalf's staff is in fact a necessary tool for performing this action. That Gandalf can't do this without his staff. Maureen, whether or not that's true of his magic as a whole, or whether it's just true of this light spell in general, I wonder. I'm now suddenly thinking back to Gandalf attempting to open the gates of Moria, open the West Gate, right? He was standing there, and remember he says that he knew 200, he knew 10 score spells of opening. And he was exerting his will to open the doors. He was casting spells right there. What does he do when he's done? When he gives up in frustration? Do you remember what he does? Miss Ray, exactly. He throws his staff down. Yeah. Throws his staff down as if to say, this worthless thing isn't working. Right? Yeah. Now, Aru, we're waiting on that. We're going to wait for Saruman's staff. Yeah, we'll get enough in this chapter, but yeah, I mean, that's going to be relevant, and we'll see that down there. But there are other things involved there, too. Did he need his staff for his magic commanding spells? I'm not sure. Now, let's, I'm wary about using too much Hobbit stuff directly. I'm wary of it because we're in kind of a different place. Yeah, it's like Gandalf 0.1 Balinor. Yeah, something like that. Gandalf's already evolved a good deal. Not quite as much as he's going to, right? Still. But yeah, Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings. When we see Gandalf show up at Bag End in Chapter 1 of the Fellowship of the Ring, just like we saw him show up at Bag End in Chapter 1 of The Hobbit, it's quite different, right? Early access Gandalf, Ren. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, Jackie, I agree. There was a spoken spell involved when he was dealing with the wolves, and when he lit the fire on Carathras. There were spoken. There was a spoken spell in both places there as well. I don't know that we have clear and sort of sufficiently unified evidence to conclude at this point that Gandalf can do no magic without his staff. That would seem to me to be going too far. But it does seem that he is, he needs his, for this spell, for the light spell. Like I said, if I would think if he could do that light spell in any other way, almost any other way would be better than this. He seems to need it, at least for this spell. The role of Gandalf's staff, again, this is one of the things that is most interesting about this chapter, because we will get more data about wizardly staff usage in this chapter than we will get anywhere else in the Lord of the Rings. We of course will have a couple more really interesting passages. Saruman's staff breaking, of course, is one of them. Gandalf and the getting admission to Meduseld, of course, is another one. Yes, exactly, Jackie. But there we are. So we'll get to those, but those will be building on this, right? I really think that Tolkien is kind of experimenting with stuff here. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, For an instant, the wizard looked out. Oh, and I did see somebody was mentioning before that there's no struck by lightning. Gandalf making a lightning flash, which even this is something that is an old Hobbit trick, right? When Gandalf makes a sudden flash of blue light from his staff in Bilbo's parlor, that's what makes Bilbo grovel on the fender, saying, on the mat, saying "struck by lightning, right? And he says that because it looks like a lightning flash, and he believes he's been struck by lightning, or is worried that he has been struck by, or is going to be struck by lightning. We get lightning with the wolves too, in Journey in the Dark, and there was the flash with which he killed several goblins in the rescue of Thorin and company from the Great Goblin, right before Bilbo finds his way down to Gollum. And we did get the flash of fire like lightning going up from the hill at Weathertop Balinar. Absolutely. So that Gandalf makes bright flashes of light is well attested, right? This is not a surprise that he's able to pull this off. That he can do such things, aggressively, right? That is, as some sort of offensive weapon, like he did with the goblins, right? The Great Goblin, and that he seemed to be using them in a similar way at Weathertop, in fending off the Black Riders. That seems clear, right? That he can do that. He doesn't appear to be doing that here. He's just trying to assess what's going on. Yeah. Yes, and in earlier versions he did lightning at Crick Hollow too. Yes, agreed. And To Juice Man, I agree. Says, I really think that Tolkien hadn't worked out the details of Gandalf's magic before this episode. The needs of the story inform the world building for him, not the other way around. That is manifestly true in The Lord of the Rings. Manifestly true. And that's why I think this is going to be such an interesting theme to be looking at. Theme, pattern, trend, little fact, right, to be looking at, is how he depicts magic, because I do think that these Gandalf's confrontations, starting here and going through the confrontation on the bridge, they really are times when Tolkien is being forced, more than he ever has before, to really work out, what does magic work, and what does a magic on magic fight look like exactly. So yeah, I think it's a big deal. Cool. Yeah. Now, Aspen, you're right. We were looking at developments and changes between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Well, what I was mostly interested in looking at there were like references, right? All of the, from Carothros through to the West Gate, all of the different sort of memories of the Hobbit, from the wolves and the secret door and all that. There are all these things which seem to be more like allusions to the Hobbit, or recapitulations of Hobbity things. So I am interested in how he's kind of doing that. And there's a memory here, right? There is a memory here of the Great Goblin and the rescue of Thorin. That's the one that I particularly think of, all of these goblins laughing, and then Gandalf makes the bright shining light. What is particularly interesting to me, remember that when we were up on the tor with wolves attacking and Gandalf strode forward to meet the wolves, that seemed to be a really clear instance of Gandalf having grown up, right? Gandalf, not content to light pine cones on fire and chuck them at the wolves, instead blasts all of the trees off the top of the hill with fire, right? We see Gandalf doing something much stronger and much more powerful and much more authoritative than he did with the wargs in The Hobbit. So the parallel was kind of illuminating in that way. Here, it's interesting because he's here it's interesting because it's almost the opposite, isn't it? When Gandalf sneaks in and follows them down, the goblins, that is, who are dragging Thorin, Bilbo, and company down to Goblin Town, as it may be, Gandalf comes in and blasts, kills the great goblin and blasts a bunch of other goblins and throws them all into a panic, and then makes off with Thorin and company in the confusion. Here, once again, we see Gandalf confronted by a large horde of orcs, and he, on the one hand, drawing himself up to his full height, right? He's speaking authoritatively, but he doesn't blast him. He doesn't try to blast him. He doesn't try to blast his way out of this. The orcs in the cavern of the great, in the great hall of the great goblin, ran away from from Gandalf's smokes and lights and blasts. He doesn't do anything of the sort here. There are too many to blast, Miss Ray. I think that both sides have grown up here, right? The goblins have grown up too. That's the problem, as he's just about to point out in the next paragraph, which we will discuss next week. We should stop now and do our field trip. But next time we will get Gandalf's assessment of what he sees when he sticks his head into the crack in the door and looks out at what his enormously bright light is showing him outside. All right. Thanks, everybody who was just able to join us for our text discussion, and we will continue our delightful field trip of Moria, which has been just one of my favorite field trips of our whole, of all of our expeditions so far.
Oh, I agree. It's been quite edifying.
It really has. It really has. But all right, let me crash my game as always, and then we'll come right back in.
Alrighty. Okay, so time for my 2 cents. The description of laughter, like rocks falling and then like falling into a pit, like there's a sequence of events there. There's that sound from above, that moment of sheer panic as you look around to find out where it came from and strain your ears to listen where it is. And then there's that horrible silence as you wait for any clarity as to what those rocks are doing in the dark. Are they near me? Are they far away? Where are they? When will I hear them?
Yes.
And then you hear them bouncing off the walls of the chasm that you didn't see near you.
Yes.
It's like he wrote it in that sequence right there.
Absolutely. Yes. Bricktails, yes, we're starting the Peoples of Middle-earth tomorrow. Yeah, we're starting the Peoples of Middle-earth. Hang on, I was going to reach down my book. I didn't before because it's green, so I can't show it on screen.
Cursed chroma key.
Yeah, exactly. The prologue. Definitely read the prologue. The prologue in part 1. I don't know that we'll get to the appendix on languages, but definitely read the prologue. Man, sorry, now I'm looking at the table of contents of the Peoples of Middle-earth. It's going to be so much fun. We're going to get to the Shibboleth of Feanor. We're going to get to the history of the Akalabeth. The calendars.
All right.
Oh, man. Anyway.
I got... Sorry, I got ported to a 21st also.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
When you log in, I'll just
send you the
invite.
I will join you. So there we are. That's what we're going to be doing. Starting tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Anyway, so sorry, Valori. I interrupted your 2 cents. I didn't want to let Bricktails go.
No, I was pretty much done.
Yeah. Anyway, but also, I think that you're right. The thing I was going to add to that is he doesn't just say stones sliding. He says a fall of stones sliding. Right. There is a kind of, as you say, a kind of narrative to that, a kind of sequence to that. that he is. There's a suddenness to it, like a suddenness to its beginning. Oh, hang on, I'm in the middle of traveling here now. It's a fall of rocks. Yeah, sorry, you need to do the imitation again.
Okay.
It's a fall of stones sliding. So first you've got like rocks on the side of a hill, and then they suddenly fall off and begin sliding and then end up in a pit. So you're right that has like a beginning, a middle, and an end to it. I think that is an interesting and important point.
Soon to his halls.
Yeah, but there's so much of that in between that is just silence and a small horror story of its own.
Yes, agreed. Okay, back to the Hall of Flowing Water, I think.
Okay. Let me put your little star on so we can see ya. When you run off as you are wont to do.
All right, there we are. Okay. All right.
Why am I suddenly forgetting where we're going?
Hall of Flowing Water.
Flowing water. Thank you. It's funny. Sunday morning, I was not at all affected by the shenanigans of Saturday night, but it seems to be getting out at me today. I don't know why. It's like delayed reaction.
Yeah.
I have latency.
All right. We ready?
Yes.
All right, here we go. So let us head south through, as always, the end of the spa, out past the swimming hole. I'm going to try not to fall down the stairs this time. Fall off the cliff. Okay, through the shallows here. Wow, that one was a little bit less shallow in that spot. Okay, and then out to the swimming hole.
I think that was like one of the more functional drains at the side.
Yeah, it must have been. Okay, and then we're going to go down the stairs, and let's see if I can do it correctly this time.
The swimming
Right, it's
hole.
not an immediate right here, which is what I did last time. We go down the 2 flights and then off to the right, and down we go. Sorry, I'm doing this on foot because I'm wanting to remember the.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oz, I wouldn't expect to see swimming halls and pizza ovens in Moria either, but here we are.
Exactly. And here we are down to the pizza parlor.
Yep. The
Vales of Anduin Authentic.
Vales of Anduin, yep.
Okay, and now down to the, on our left, lower priced housing, and on our right, much more deluxe housing. And then we had gotten down over here as far as this forging area. What looks like a community work area right near both. So, maybe you could come down here and do a little light forging while you're waiting for your pizza to be made. But at the very least, you could do so from the neighborhood. Okay.
It's like the ball pit for dwarf kids.
Exactly. Just like the ball pit. All right. So now we come down to the next level. And we had started kind of looking down here because this landing down here is around the base. Interesting. It seems to be mostly... Oh, these are orc weapon racks.
And very nice tables.
Yeah. There's what looks like some treasure there. Yeah, that's dwarf stuff right there. Okay,
Yep.
So I'm going to guess
What if they're looking for mithril?
Well, I'm going to guess then that this area down here, because we're right downstairs from the forging up there, that this is some kind of like storage or staging area where you can make stuff upstairs and then you can I don't know what, store it down here. Maybe the like materials can be fetched from down here.
These vase are like these look like metal barrels. Like they needed something stronger than a wood stave barrel.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe this is like where all the coke sludge comes.
Yeah, maybe some kind of storeroom down here. But again, it's the fact that it is adjacent to, though not quite on exactly the same level as the, the forging
No, like
area
real
upstairs.
oven here or...
Yeah, no, there was no work being done here, but you could clearly store stuff. But it doesn't seem like a top secret treasury, unless, of course, this over here, in the floor beneath the forging area up top there, unless there's a door that is not made to be seen when shut in here, such that you could lock away some treasures in there, and then out here you could store things like materials and whatever, things to be used or things that were made. Maybe if you come and, as you said, it's like the ball pit for dwarf kids. If people come and just like forge things for fun while they're waiting, they could then leave them out for public use down here. The things that you
or
created
like maybe
up there.
these are work tables for gems or
Could
jewelry
be.
or...
You're right. The tables
bits.
are quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
These are beautiful tables and in excellent condition.
They still look like they could take a beating though, and get plenty scratched up without any real problems.
Yeah, that's true.
I seem to be frozen.
These these long tables do seem like they could be work tables of different kinds as well. So yeah. And yes, I like if these are metal barrels, then technically that means that they would be drums, which means that, of course, they would then be
These are the
drums in the deep, as Vardendale was saying. Yes.
I didn't think of oil drums.
Exactly.
Wow. How about steel drums?
Steel drums. Yeah.
Steel drums in the deep.
Yep. Okay, so it seems to be connected. So down one more flight is that, and there's nothing over here, at least nothing apparent over here. So let's see if we go down another flight.
I'll catch up with you. My thing starts playing ball.
Uh-oh. I'm sorry.
There we go. My connection has been lost.
Oh, dear.
And I will bring it back. It's fine. I'll catch up. I say that, but then I can't get lost from you when you're like 1 foot away.
Huh. So this down here...
It always acts up when we have bad heat. I'm sorry.
This next little landing... First of all, I really like the fact that what we're not getting here, from the spa all the way down to where we're headed down to, right, all the way down towards the Flaming Deeps, the Red Horn Lodes, we're going down many, many, many levels here, right? But instead of just having an enormously long stairway, we have all these landings on every floor. There's nothing here. I think this is just a scenic overlook. It's too tall for dwarves to look over it.
We saw similar issues with upstairs.
Yeah.
With the same landings up there.
But I mean, this is a gorgeous view, especially if, you like the natural cavern look, right? You've got the view upstairs. You can't see anything upstairs anymore, but you can still see the beautiful natural ceiling with, underlit by the glow of the forges up there above.
You gotta.
And then when you look over to the south here, you can see this passage leading... Let me see if I can get down a little bit more. There we go. You can see this passage leading the big statue down there and some works down there in the wall, whatever that place is down in front of us that we haven't gotten to. This looks like... I don't think anything was here. Oh, yeah, you can even come over to this side and look down that corridor over there and see the beautiful colors down there. We're getting down to our next flight. Will bring us to a turning of the ways, it looks like. We can go right or left from the bottom of the stairs.
Well, some people go this way.
Yeah. But yeah, this seems to just be a scenic overlook. Maybe there were The floor is all worn away over there, but there was a fancy floor. New floor, not old floor.
Well, there's some new, and here's some very Art Deco geometric.
Yeah, that's the new stuff.
Oh, okay.
That's the new. Remember the in the back up in the Hall of Durins, like the Hall of Durin, the more ancient
yes.
tiling of the floors. We decided this was the post-Aregian Art Deco movement.
Oh, yes.
So yeah,
man, that is a big chasm.
Yes, though we're getting towards the bottom of it. You can see a path in the bottom of the chasm now. So we're now closer to the bottom of the chasm than the top. So let's
What are all the shiny things?
What, downstairs?
At the bottom of the chasm.
Oh, I don't know. What's Okay, so we're not gonna be able to go explore too far.
No, I'm
just looking around. So we look left, and we have a stately hallway, beautifully lit blue and purple hallway, leading off. But this is, as I say, stately. This is not like a little corridor.
No,
this looks almost like the great, the great road up top did. So this is clearly an important passageway to somewhere important. And then this is barely paved. You can see that it did have floor, but it leads to a cliff.
Does anyone else see the shiny bits, or is it just my render?
Down on the floor?
Yeah, it looks like there's little bits of pyrite all over.
I see creatures moving down there. I don't see anything shiny.
Just my render.
Exactly.
What if I got the bloom set too?
Maybe.
Oh, okay. Somebody else sees shiny. Okay. I'm not crazy.
Amathorn thinks they might be mushrooms.
Oh.
Well, we'll see. Brown rocks and mushrooms, JJ says.
Brown rock and mushrooms. That's certainly less poetical.
Okay.
I look forward to the later mush rush.
So, down there at the bottom of this enormous chasm that we've been slowly traveling down, we have a natural path, which doesn't look like it was ever paved.
No.
But we can't get there from here. And I don't think...
There's something carved down there, but I don't know
I don't think
what
we
it
used
is.
to be able to get there from here either. I think this is... Again, no retaining wall, no safety of any kind. But I think that it's... I think this was just an overlook. Again, to... Just like we were seeing from up top there, we're now looking at the beautiful natural walls and ceilings and the cavern down there, and just around the corner to the beautifully carved statue and areas up over there.
Well, yeah, mushrooms would be important to Moria society. You guys are right.
Oh, for sure.
Like, you definitely have a bunch of farms there. One of the few
growing mushrooms, absolutely.
Rat proteins down here, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we can't go that direction, but it was a lovely little view, which they apparently enjoy. So next time, we will go down this hallway, and we seem to be pointing over toward the Redhorn Lodes. So, as we've been looking at on the map, we can see the map tells us that we've got, passages that lead to the Redhorn Lodes and the Flaming Deeps, which we haven't explored yet. I have been waiting to see what the junctions there look like. Like, what are the junctions? What are the signage? How is the flow from Zelamelech here down to these other places? So far, everything we've seen about Zelamelech has suggested, like living and leisure quarters. Right, we've had lots of and formal reception. We had the main highway. We had the formal reception place of Durin's Hall and the adjacent hospitality suites. We've had the larger apartment area, but sort of I think, kind of lower income apartments up there north of the road. We've had the great spa and watering hole, and then the pizza parlor in the upscale neighborhood. And now we have descended down towards the load. So what is this? How does it go? How does it flow? What does it look like as we go towards these two different places? And it looks like our hallway here is taking us straight towards what on the map says is the path to the Red Horn Lodes. So we'll see.
Yeah, that path does not say foot baths and pizza.
It doesn't. It suggests not. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now
It's like first we start off with the big touristy area, and then we have like all of the shops and attractions, like the ones outside of Disney World.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the people who have either been to the parks 100 times or are sick of the parks and they just want to shop.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, so Rowan, there is a stable close to you, just inside on the Red Horn Lodes, right? Tell you what.
Yeah, we should get that for next time.
Yeah, we'll scout. Well, I'm thinking let's scout around to that next time. Next time let's come back from the top and we'll see the flow again. I'll mount up next time. I won't run on foot, so we won't lose quite as much time. But we'll we'll come down. We'll come down on mounts next time, and then flow through into here, and we'll just peek into the Red Horn Lodes and see if there's a stable. I think there's a stable master right in there. That would make things easier. But that'll be good. All right, so we'll pick up here next time, and we're maybe just a couple, a handful of field trips away from being done with Zelamelech. In which case, we will have covered what? 3 areas of Moria: the Great Delving, Durin's Way, and Zelamelech.
They said it couldn't be done.
How about that? So we will have done 3 down, and only 6 to go. So there we are. 1/3 of the way through Moria is more or less where we are.
Excellent.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. That's what we'll do next time. Thanks a lot, everybody, for coming with us, and we will see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.